She was the most powerful woman in England, till one morning she was dragged to the Tower and executed by her own husband. Her crime? Perhaps loving a king too much, or perhaps simply being a woman who dared to want more? This is the dark, captivating, and ultimately tragic story of Anne Boleyn, the queen who changed history, only to be consumed by the very fire she helped ignite. Imagine England in the early 1500s, a realm ruled by the formidable King Henry VIII, a monarch obsessed with power, legacy, and, above all, securing his dynasty with a male heir. At his side was Queen Catherine of Aragon, his devoted wife of over 2 decades. Their marriage was stable, but it had failed to produce a surviving son. The court was a stage of political maneuvering and quiet ambition, but no one could have predicted the whirlwind that was about to arrive. And then she appeared, Anne Boleyn. She wasn't just another pretty face at court. She was young, yes, but also fiercely intelligent, witty, and armed with a captivating charm that was impossible to ignore. Having spent her formative years in the sophisticated courts of France, she returned to England with a continental flair and a mind of her own. Unlike the other ladies who might have been flattered by the king's attention and quickly succumbed to becoming his mistress, Anne was different. She played a dangerous game. She refused to be just another temporary affair. She made the king wait. She challenged him, debated with him, and matched his intellect. And in doing so, she didn't just capture his attention. She ignited an obsession that would burn down the old world. Henry, a man used to getting everything he desired, found himself utterly captivated. He promised her everything: riches, titles, even the throne itself, if she would just be his. But Anne held firm. She wanted it all or nothing. She wouldn't be his mistress. She would be his wife and queen. For Anne, Henry was more than a lover. He was the key to unimaginable power and a chance to place her family at the pinnacle of English society. For Henry, Anne was a passion he couldn't control, a prize he had to win at any cost. But there was one colossal obstacle. Henry was already married, and the Catholic Church, led by the Pope in Rome, did not permit divorce. For years, Henry pleaded with the Pope for an annulment, arguing his marriage to Catherine was invalid. But the Pope, under pressure from Catherine's powerful nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor, refused. What happened next was seismic. It was a move that no one saw coming. Fueled by his obsession for Anne and his desperation for a son, Henry did the unthinkable. He broke away from the centuries-old authority of the Catholic Church, defied the Pope, and declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England. This wasn't just a political maneuver. It was a revolution that plunged the kingdom into religious turmoil and reshaped the spiritual landscape of a nation. And he did it all for one woman. In 1533, after years of waiting, Anne Boleyn's dream came true. Catherine was cast aside, and Anne was crowned Queen of England in a lavish ceremony. She was pregnant, and the entire kingdom held its breath, certain that the new queen would deliver the long-awaited male heir. It should have been the ultimate triumph, the start of a glorious reign. But it quickly soured and became her worst nightmare. The baby was born, and it was a girl. A healthy, bright-eyed girl named Elizabeth. While history would one day know her as one of England's greatest monarchs, at that moment her birth was a catastrophe for Anne. Henry's disappointment was immense, his fury palpable. He had torn his kingdom apart for this. For another daughter? His passion for Anne began to cool, replaced by frustration and a growing resentment. The court, which had once been mesmerized by Anne, now saw her as vulnerable. Whispers and conspiracies filled the palace corridors. Her enemies, and she had many, saw their chance. They painted her as a jealous, cruel, and ambitious shrew. Rumors flew that she was a witch who had enchanted the king. Once the master of the courtly game, now found herself isolated and surrounded. Her sharp tongue and confident demeanor, once seen as charming, were now twisted into evidence of her wickedness. And then Henry's gaze fell upon another woman, the quiet, gentle, and submissive Jane Seymour. Jane was everything Anne was not. Where Anne was fiery and challenging, Jane was demure and obedient. She promised the king a son and the peaceful, compliant wife he now craved. For Anne, the writing was on the wall. Her fate was sealed. In May of 1536, the trap was sprung. The fall was swift and brutal. Queen Anne Boleyn was arrested on a series of fabricated, outrageous charges: adultery with multiple men, incest with her own brother, and high treason against the king. It was a vicious, calculated campaign to destroy her. These accusations were lies, a political assassination orchestrated by her enemies and approved by a king desperate to rid himself of her. But in the climate of fear that gripped the court, no one dared to speak the truth and defend the queen. At her trial, faced with certain death, Anne did not crumble. She stood tall and proud, defending her honor with eloquence and dignity. She declared, "I have always been a faithful and loyal wife to the king. May God be my judge." But her guilt had already been decided. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. Henry wanted her gone, and so she would be. On the morning of May 19th, 1536, Anne was led to a private scaffold within the walls of the Tower of London. To spare her the clumsy horror of the executioner's axe, Henry had granted her a final, small mercy, a skilled swordsman summoned from France. She wore a simple gray gown, her dark hair tucked away. She faced the small crowd of witnesses with a calm and grace that stunned everyone present. Her final words were not of anger or bitterness, but of a strange, chilling forgiveness. "I pray God save the king and send him long to reign over you, for a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never." Moments later, a single, silent stroke of the sword ended her life. Anne Boleyn's head fell, and with it, the reign of the queen who had inadvertently sparked a reformation. Anne Boleyn's ambition and Henry's obsession destroyed a royal marriage, divided a kingdom, and forever changed the course of religion in England. But in the end, she was destroyed by the very man whose power she had helped to create. They called her a seductress, a heretic, a traitor. But perhaps most of all, she was a woman who flew too close to the sun. Yet her story doesn't truly end there. Her legacy lived on in the most unexpected way. Her daughter, the girl whose birth had sealed her doom, would ascend to the throne as Queen Elizabeth I. She would rule for over 40 years, ushering in a golden age and becoming one of the most beloved and successful monarchs in history. In a final poetic twist of fate, Anne Boleyn's bloodline did not just survive. It thrived, proving that her life and her death were not in vain. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the dramatic life of Anne Boleyn. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from history. Let me know in the comments what you think was a victim, a villain, or something far more complex. See you in the next video.